I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna. This is the Mom Who Knows Nada podcast. Today we have a guest coming to us from 13 hours ahead, I believe, in
Yes, ma'am.
Japan. This has been a fun time zone to coordinate, which is always great. Thanks for getting up early. This is Dr. Michelle McDonald. She has her coffee. I have my wine. And she's going to tell us all about what life has been like for her as an expat in Japan. So, Michelle, welcome. Thanks for getting up extra early to chat with me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. So, first, before we get into your this big move and the big adventure you've been on,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you're all about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I like your final question, what you're all about. I'm not sure what I'm all about, but let's see. I am Michelle McDonald. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I specialize in pediatrics. So
Mm.
sometimes I say I'm a licensed clinical child psychologist, but I do serve adults too in other parts of my profession. So really, I specialize in pediatrics. But I'm also a spouse and a mom to three kids and a Navy wife. So I wear a lot of different hats and stir from a lot of different pots.
Oh my gosh, yeah, serving from a lot of different pots. I feel like that is a quote I'm going to use later for sure. So, you're originally from Florida, but you are living in Japan. So, what prompted this move abroad?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me back up to my prideful roots. I'm originally from New York. My husband and I are
Ooh.
native New Yorkers, and very, very proud of that. We love New York, but he is active duty Navy. And so we actually, two New Yorkers met in Jacksonville, Florida. And so that's what we kind of consider our home of record. We still kind of feel like that's home. And then from there, the Navy moved us all around. So we mostly stayed on the East Coast, Virginia and Washington,
Hmm.
D.C., and really that was it. Jacksonville. We were very lucky with the Navy. And then this last round, the Navy kind of threw a wrench in our works and said, well, how about Japan? And funny enough, it was difficult for us to make that
Hmm.
move. But my husband and I always hoped for an overseas rotation. We always wanted to travel the world and show the world to our kids and have that experience. So it wasn't exactly when we thought it would happen, but that's the Navy for you, right? We were happy
Mm.
to have this experience and to be here. So the Navy is what brought us here, but we are making the most of our time here in Japan, surely.
And how long is he stationed there for? Is there a certain tenure?
Yeah, so it should be about 3 years. I mean, give or
Okay.
take. It's really, yeah, from start to finish, it's about 3 years.
And how have you been adjusting to life in Japan?
Yeah, I think if you had asked me that 6 months ago, my response would have been very different. And,
Mm.
and we know that about adjustment, right? To bring in the psychology piece of it, humans
Hmm.
adjust to things at different rates. But honestly, in all, it takes us a bit of time to get acclimated and to get assimilated and to get comfortable in new surroundings and new scenarios. So we moved here June of 2022.
Okay.
And I think by Christmas of that year, I still had some adjustment going on. I wasn't comfortable yet.
Hmm.
Um, I think I can categorically. Ooh, oh Siri. I think I can categorically say I wasn't terribly happy. And
Mm.
then, another 6 months later, and things look and feel very different.
Hmm.
Now we're very comfortable in our surroundings. We have friends and we have, a grocery store that we go to, and our car needs an oil change. And so life feels very much like normal life, just in a very different location than we're used to. So I think we're adjusted now, but it took a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine that has been a challenge. Everything's in a very different language.
Yes.
Can't
Yes.
like cheat to read the signs. Generally
Mm.
speaking, I've never been to Japan, so I don't want to assume certain things, but I can
No, that's
imagine
very right. Yeah,
it's
it's very right. The language, and I think that's truly one of the hardest pieces that the wonderful Japanese people make easier,
Oh, okay.
is that you're right. I mean, the road signs, it's not intuitive. It's symbols and signs and sticks moved in different directions. And so there's nothing intuitive about that language of you see this sign and you think, well, maybe that might mean, right? It kind of looks like or sounds like something in English. Mm-mm.
Hmm.
And so road signs especially are difficult, especially
I
when going fast down the highway and you're like, is this my exit? I can't tell what it means. So that piece is very hard. But I mentioned the wonderful Japanese people because the folks who live here in Japan, I don't know if it's just their very considerate nature, their very
Mhm.
warm nature, but anywhere you go, for the most part, people are very willing to use Google Translate and text and talk and have
Oh,
conversation
wow.
and talk with you and help you get what you need. So that has been a really nice experience.
Is there anything else that has been difficult for you, for your kids, for your husband? Or is that like
Yeah.
that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing?
No, I think honestly, uh, and let me preface with, I said we're comfortable now, right? We're adjusted now. Um, but there is so much that is uncomfortable when you move to a new environment.
Mhm.
And I think the language is one of the biggest, certainly. We drive on the other side of the road here.
Oh,
um,
okay. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, Japan drives on the left side of the road. So that's funny and different, and you adjust to that too. And it's actually amazing when you think about the brain and how flexible it is. It happens pretty quickly that you adjust, but every once in a while, I still find myself going to get into the wrong side of the car. Um, and those are the little things, right? And my kids do it too. They'll go get in the car and get in the wrong side, and I'm like, "Oh, round." We've been here a year now, but I still do it. Um, so those are the funny little pieces. I think some of the bigger pieces, it's just I always use the word uncomfortable, right? It's
Mhm.
uncomfortable to live in a country that is not your own, regardless of how warm and receptive and considerate the people of that country are. And that has been my experience with the Japanese. They've been wonderful, but it's just uncomfortable. The roads are very small. The culture is very different. So how you behave and why you behave, being silent on the train is very difficult for my little children. Going to the bathroom and they don't use paper towels. You have to bring your own towel with you everywhere you go. And I forget all the time. So we have wet hands constantly.
Oh,
um,
wow. What an interesting nuance. That's good to
yeah,
know.
it is. And that's good. That's the right word, right? It's just there's so many nuances that I think it kind of, at least for me, keeps me at that place where I'm just always a little bit uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So that's hard. I think for the family at large, kids are so flexible and so amenable, and they've really done a great job getting used to being here and assimilating here. I think the food is a little bit difficult for all of us. I think when you live in the States, right, food is fast, number one. It's
Yeah.
accessible. There's fast food and drive through everywhere. Not
Mhm.
that, my family really ate that much, but it's just quick and easy. There's food everywhere. And the types of foods are very comfortable for us, right? So you can go into a restaurant and sit down for lunch and order a big salad with grilled chicken and lots of veggies. Japan is very, very meat focused.
Mm.
So, whereas in the States, salad and fresh vegetables and things like that are very accessible, in Japan, when you go into a restaurant, it's very common to sit down and just grill your own meat, right? So it's meat and rice, and that just is a big
Okay.
change from what we're used to. Um, so I think pieces like that, right, are still difficult for me. I can't wait to go back to the States and have a big plate of chicken parm at a fabulous Italian restaurant because we don't have, we don't have different cuisines like that in Japan. Um, so those pieces, right, are still pieces that I look forward to getting back to the States for.
Okay, so this I think that's so fascinating because I think Japan, I think sushi, and I think, you know,
Yeah.
seafood, and I think, oh, everything's got to be like with cucumbers or avocado. But then you just kind of realize, you know, how Americanized, I think certain
Yeah.
places are here.
Well, that's very true too. So there is a lot of cucumber, first of all, but the cucumber is
Okay.
wonderful.
Phew. Phew.
Yeah, no, you're right. Although I'll tell you, it's funny because the vegetables, right? The cucumbers here are much smaller. So a lot of times, and it's always kind of a joke, people confuse cucumbers and zucchinis here because they're shaped very much, they're very much the same size. It's very hard to tell the difference. So anyway, that's just a side quip. Um, but you are right about the sushi too. You know, Japan has a lot of sushi and a lot of fabulous sushi, but it is not the Americanized sushi. You're not getting a California roll and the dragon roll and the eel roll, right? It's covered in the sauce. It is a lot of sashimi, a lot of very intentional sushi. So my my husband, bless his heart, because I would never be so brave, but my husband has eaten a lot of recently, if not still mildly alive things, because that's just everything is so fresh. And that's, you know, you go to a sushi restaurant and they cut you a fresh shrimp and there you go, you eat it. And it's delicious the way they serve it, right? I'm not disparaging it, but
Yeah.
it's just very different, very different.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. Let's talk a little bit about your role, because we're gonna get into the mom and your professionalism in a
Yeah,
little bit,
yeah.
but like your role as a military wife and what that has meant for you
Hmm.
in amongst all these different hats that you have to wear.
Yeah, yeah. So specifically as a military spouse, um, you know, I think it's interesting because I said to you when we first started our conversation, we were offline, right?
Mhm.
Um, my husband's career, my husband's job, really is our professional priority.
Mhm.
My job is my passion, and I'm extremely attached to it. It's part of my identity. I'm extremely glad to be able to do what I do and take it to Japan with me, which is very unique because many spouses come to Japan and cannot work for lots of different reasons. So I was extremely lucky to be able to work while I'm here.
That's awesome.
Um, but we prioritize my husband's job, and I think you know, to be completely candid, I think sometimes that creates difficulties as a spouse and as a mom
Mhm.
and as a professional, right? That impacts all different facets of life. And my husband is not ignorant to this. We talk about this openly, and so you know, when we were in the States, prioritizing his job meant one thing, right?
Yeah.
It meant that, like you and I talked about, I was the default parent, right? And when something happened, I stayed home and I took care of the kids or whatever, so that we could make sure to put his job first, and he could make sure to go to work and do what he had to do. In Japan, that's different to a degree, right? Because while we're still absolutely prioritizing his career, the expectations for a military spouse here in Japan are very different. You know, we're alone. Our support systems are not here. So spouses come to Japan with their service member and wind up unable to work in a foreign country where they don't speak the language and they don't know the culture and it's uncomfortable. And we're driving on the other side of the road, right? All those things we talked about.
Mhm.
And then their service member deploys, and now they're alone without any of those things. And so part of my role, being here with my husband, is making sure to make myself accessible to the other spouses that are here, to help
Mhm.
provide for them and care for them and make sure they're okay, while also making sure I'm okay, right? And making sure my husband's okay and making sure my three kids are okay. Um, and the God's honest truth is I love it.
That's
I
good.
do. Yeah, I love it. And I think I'm very I hate to use the word blessed. I think people overuse that, and I don't mean it in that kind of liturgical sense. Um, but I just feel very blessed to have the opportunity to be able to help people that way.
Mhm.
Um, but it does absolutely, right, bring another level to that role, bring another set of expectations. And I think that's true for all sorts of military spouses in all sorts of different locations. That role as a male spouse always brings additional expectations and hats and jobs to our lives. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of what came up for me when you asked
No,
me.
hey, this is you answer however it hits you. That's exactly how it should be.
Mm.
But I think it's really interesting that you feel kind of this gratitude for your position
Yeah,
there, um,
yeah,
because you are a clinical psychologist and your
yeah,
role is to help and serve people. So now
yeah,
you're using that in your personal life
yeah,
all the time as well as in your professional life all the time. So if it's something like you said that is very much your identity, well, it feels like a
yeah,
really I don't want to say easy transition, but a natural transition.
yeah,
Like that feels very organic to be able to slide into that role as like, mother hen or just,
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what the word would be, but something like that. you
Yeah,
know?
no, and that's true, right? And we talk about how our personalities lend us to these different roles that we get into. So you're a teacher because there's something about your personality that makes you a good fit for that position, or you're a
Mm,
doctor because something about your personality makes you a good fit. And same thing, right, for psychology. Psychologists are in that role and in different parts of psychology because there's something about our personalities that just fits that profession. And so I've always had that inclination towards being a natural helper, right? When I was a kid, I was actually in a group called Natural Helpers. That was actually the name of it. I know sometimes these things come full circle and you look back and you're like, oh my God. So yeah, so being able to come here and yes, use that on the personal side,
mhm.
and also use it on the professional side, it is absolutely uh, a blessing and an opportunity I'm so thankful for. Yeah.
And
I
so
want to mention, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Something you said came up for me, and when I was talking, I kind of lost track of what it was, but I think it's really important, and I want to go back to it. Um, One of the things that I think is so important about being able to work here is that our military families, especially overseas, but definitely in the States too, we do not have great access to care. And I'm going to say mental health care because that's the industry I'm in, right? But there's been a number of times in the States serving humans where somebody has come to me and said, I'm TRICARE, and I've had to turn them away because the practice I worked for or the hospital that I worked for didn't take TRICARE. TRICARE, respectfully, can be difficult to work with. I'll kind of leave it at that. But so to be here and to be able to serve the military community that I'm a part of, that's another level to me, right? Like that's just the icing on top of all of the cakes. So that piece too is really, really quite special.
well, it's really interesting you said that, and I won't go down a deep rabbit hole, but I'll just give this anecdote. Is I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and so we
Mm.
definitely have a lot of people in like the Delmarva area
Yeah.
that are military families. And my dad happened to have a house in Key West, um, and because there's a Navy base in Key West, they have to have a VA home, right? So there
Yep.
is a regular, like a tourist who would come down every year with his wife, and he was former military. And when they would come down for their annual vacation, he would go to the VA hospital in Key West because he never had to wait for appointments. And
Uh-huh.
every
Yep.
time he was coming from, I think it was I can't remember if it's Maryland or Virginia. It doesn't matter. But the whole point was like it was always long wait times, couldn't get the
Yeah.
help he need, couldn't see the
Yeah.
doctors he needed to see, couldn't get his annual appointments, couldn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, here he could go to this and get serviced, and you're just like, huh,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
isn't that telling?
Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. And it's difficult for lots of different reasons. I don't think it's easy to just sit and say, well, it's this, right? Like this is why. And it's difficult for lots of different reasons, TRICARE only being one of them. But yeah, I empathize and I understand his situation. And like I was saying, it just makes me so much more grateful to be on the ground here, embedded in a community and serving the military community in which I'm embedded. I just think that's amazing. So yeah,
And so, what about your kids? Like, how has this,
yeah,
school or what how
yeah.
have they he adapted to this new environment?
Yeah. Yeah, so my kids are awesome. They are 9, 7, and 5. So when we moved here, actually they were 3,
Oh, wow.
5, and 8, 7 or 8. Depending on when their birthdays fell when we got here. So it's been interesting to watch their adjustment and the different adjustment that happens at different ages, right?
Yeah.
I think my littlest, she's just so little, and the
Mhm.
world is just so open and so fun and so free to her. We got here and she adjusted really well, and then we put her in school, and we call her our bravest little McDonald because she goes out the front of our house and she gets on a bus and she goes on a 40-minute bus ride to a school in Japan where she spends all day. It's an international school, so there's children of all different backgrounds there, but they speak a lot of Japanese and they eat Japanese food, and she participates in the Japanese community. And then she takes a 40-minute bus ride home, and she sits down and does her Japanese homework, right? So she acts like that is
Wow.
very normal. And we don't tell her
Wow.
otherwise, right? We're like, yes, of course, it's normal to count in Japanese. And um,
Oh, it's so great.
yeah, yeah. I took her for a haircut the other day, and we're walking through a parking lot, and she's just skipping and singing in Japanese, and I have no idea what she's singing, but it's just it's just so lovely. So I hope she keeps that up. But
Wow.
so for her, that's been kind of easy. And she eats everything, by the way, too. So the food is no problem for her. She's like, whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah. My middle guy, is funny because I think he's probably the one that we worried the least about on the adjustment, on the transition.
Mhm.
And he is a very cool, very flexible dude. But I think for him, it really showed us how difficult and how big this move was when school started last year.
Mm.
He had a really hard time when school started last year, and I won't go into the details just for his own privacy, but um, I think we were surprised and taken back and kind of watching him struggle with this piece of life. School for kids is such a huge part of their lives, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they spend 6 to 8 hours in school every day. They're more than they're with us. And so to see him struggle with that piece, and it really was the adjustment, right? Going into a new school with all these people I
Mm.
don't know in a new country. We just moved to and left all these people that I know behind. I think watching him struggle with that was really hard for us.
Mhm.
Um, and gave us the opportunity to be in that with him, right? And say like, hey, it's normal to struggle
Mhm.
with this. And let's figure this out together.
Yeah.
Um, but that was interesting and hard. And since then, he's come really far. And part of that is development. He's aged and he's grown and he thinks about things differently. But part of it is he's more comfortable, right? He has friends and he knows the community, and there's lots of things here that he loves. So that's been easier.
Is the
Um,
school in different languages? Was
so
it in
we go
Japanese?
No, here we go to a base school.
Oh,
So
okay,
so
okay.
that piece was normal for him. It was all
Okay.
English. I think just all the other unknowns, right? If it was
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Japanese, I don't think we ever would have gotten along with this, right? But yeah,
Fair. Fair,
fair.
kid, fair.
Yeah, I don't blame him either. Yeah. And my big one is just so wonderfully social and friendly and happy. And we knew that this transition would be probably most difficult for her. And I think in the beginning, right, and that's how kids are different. In the beginning, it was a challenge for her. But again, kids they don't sit down and say, well, good morning,
Mhm.
mother. I'm feeling very sad today. I miss my friends, right? That's not how it comes out. It
No.
comes out in different ways. And no matter how knowledgeable you are of your kid, sometimes when they do something or they act a certain way, your inclination is, well, what the heck are you doing that for? Right? Like, cut it out.
Mhm.
But then when you step back and you go, oh my God, we just moved to a foreign country. right? Like this is all new and
Yeah.
scary and different. And of course, you're going to have some behaviors that are different for you and don't seem like what we're used to. So I think for her, the beginning, the an immediate transition, she was the most aware, right? She was the oldest. That
Mhm.
immediate transition was the hardest. But being so social and we played to her strengths, right? We got her involved with the kids. We got her involved with the sports. We got her involved with a extracurricular she likes. She made friends at school. We encouraged those connections. And so through that piece that's always been so important to her, that social piece, I think that helped her adjust and kind of build the bridges that she needed to build to feel more comfortable here. So it's been different watching them, right? The
Oh,
different kids and the different ways they react.
and their personalities, and it's really interesting too because, like, I think 5 is so pivotal, so if you're coming over there and your middle is 5, that's when they
Yeah,
remember. Like, that's their consciousness and their memory
yeah,
and long-term, short-term memory is very, very good on they're
it's
just coming
true.
into and
Yeah,
they just know what it was like, and they have this
that's right.
very distinct database of recollections, and you're just like,
Yeah, yeah,
and they're
yeah,
not wrong, but there's
right.
also different ways of doing things, and you're just so
Yeah,
I could see that how that's jarring. Um,
yeah, yeah. And I
absolutely.
think with our kids, we're so inclined to try and make it better, right? And a lot of times what that leads itself to is yes,
Mhm,
but, right? So they're like, I miss my friends, and you're like, yes, we miss our friends, but, right? Here's all these wonderful things, and I think being in that with them,
mhm,
and honestly, having those griefs ourselves, right? My husband
mhm.
and I adjusting alongside them and missing some of the same pieces. I think it helped us lean more into yes and, right? So yes, we miss our friends, and it's hard, right? And it doesn't feel good.
Yep.
And here's some things here that I'm going to use to try and help myself, to try and make myself feel better in those moments, right? So
Mhm.
challenging. Yeah.
No, and you're exactly right. Too, all of that is just to say, like, you forget sometimes how difficult it is as a child because even as an
Yeah.
adult who's more aware and conscientious and does all these things, like, it's still a struggle for us. Like, it's
Yeah.
still a struggle to, like, this is hard, period. It will
Yeah.
get better, but this
Yeah.
is hard. And, like, I
Yeah.
talked to my son tonight and my husband texted me like, "Please," he's like, "answer your
Mm.
phone or call me back in 10 minutes. It's been a really tough day." And for
Mm.
Declan too. And and he said, and he was talking about something, and we're gonna do this, and I said, "Declan, it's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
like validating, like it's okay to miss mommy. It's okay to miss this. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
coming, but I know it's hard for you and daddy right
Yeah.
now." Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's not the way I grew up. Is like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was told like, buck up, buttercup, like, and it's
Some
like,
dirt in it.
yeah. It's like, well, no, I'm allowed to be sad, and I
Yeah.
think what you're saying is, like, you're doing this alongside them, and I
Yeah.
would say for me, sometimes it's hard to be the adult in that situation of,
Yeah. Sure.
I am the model here.
Sure.
Like, crap,
Yeah.
I am setting
Yeah.
the tone and the
Isn't that
ugh.
right? And we've had, 40 or whatever years to practice making things okay, right? And still for us, it's not okay. And that's okay, right? And I think that modeling piece you mentioned, I actually talk to families and talk to parents about that a lot.
Mm,
Especially in 2023, where we know more and the zeitgeist has kind of changed around how we talk to kids about emotions and how we navigate our own emotions, right? But I talk to parents a lot about that modeling piece and about being able to have your emotions and talk about
mm,
your emotions out loud. When we first got here last summer, and I don't know if this is going to be a core memory for my daughter, probably because she still brings it up. We got here last summer, and I remember just we were in this house and it was an empty house for the most
mm,
part and none of our things were here, right? Because when you move to a foreign country it takes 3 months for your things to get here. So we've
yeah,
got, uh, don't get me wrong, the community here took very good care of us. People helped us tremendously, But still, when you don't have your own things, it's different. So we're in this empty house. We don't have our things. All the other kids are in summer camp, and my kids got here late, right, and couldn't do summer camp. So we've just kind of got this open, endless summer until school starts. And I don't know where to go, and I don't know how to go. And I just felt very, very trapped and very alone. And I had one day that it just all came to a head, right? And I started
Mm-hmm.
crying, and I'm having this kind of crying experience, and I'm doing it in front of my kids. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember my daughter coming over to me and saying, "Don't cry, mommy, don't cry." And just in that moment being able to turn to her and say, "No, it's okay for mommy to cry. Mommy's cried too, right? Like, I'm upset right now. I'm not going to be upset forever. It's going to be okay, but I just need to cry in this moment. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to do this to make my sadness feel a little bit better. Maybe we can go on a walk or go get ice cream or whatever it was, right?"
Mm-hmm.
But just being able to model that for them and normalize that for them, it's okay to have those emotions and to express those emotions and to talk about them, but then
Mm-hmm.
also to do something about them, right?
Right.
Something that's positive and pro-social and healthy, whatever it is for you. But that modeling, I think, is so important.
Yeah, you can feel your feels, but you gotta
Yeah,
move through them. You can't wallow in them.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
so what have you really enjoyed about Japan and the culture and the way of life
yeah,
there? Like, there's got to be
yeah,
so many like so many different things and nuances, and you know.
yeah, yeah. There's some really cool things about Japanese culture and about the Japanese uh, geography that lends itself to some cool stuff. So let me start culturally. I guess I kind of knew this about the Japanese, but you don't really know it until you get here.
Mm,
Um, the Japanese are very intentional, right?
mm,
Everything is done with intention, with purpose. And I hate to use the word mindful because I think that word has gotten again kind of misused and misconstrued. Um, but the Japanese are very purposeful, right? They sit down to do something, and that's the thing that they're doing. And they take their time doing it, and they do it very well. And
mm.
then at the end, the product is finished, and they clean it up and they move on and they do something else, right? I think, yeah, I think
Woo,
to me, I know. How
right?
wonderful would that be, right? I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
that,
Squirrel, butterfly.
especially
Ah.
yeah, yeah. And especially as a mom, right? And as a busy mom and as a working mom, I think so often, just like you just kind of described, our brains have to go in a million different directions, right? The lunches and the coffee and the water pot and the soccer cleats and so
Mhm.
we absolutely think about and do a million things at the same time. And I think for a lot of moms, that just adds to and creates and contributes to and compounds the stress that we feel about normal life, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very overwhelming. So to come to Japan and have the Japanese say, okay, let's sit down and do this first. I had the opportunity to participate in a tea ceremony, um,
Ooh.
and it was just amazing. I had to quiet my mind, right? But honestly, but to go and to sit and be quiet and be very intentional about something so simple as making a cup of tea, right?
Mm.
And then enjoying said cup of tea for this very busy mama, that was like a brand new idea. Uh, and honestly, it took some practice to just be like, okay, just enjoy this moment, like just be quiet and just enjoy this moment. And so I think that part of the culture, I will take with me, and it shows up in a lot of different places. Even with their housing style,
Mm.
Japanese houses are very small. There's a lot of people who live in Japan, and it's a small island, right? So to
Mhm.
accommodate all of those people, the housing is small, the streets are small, the cars are small, everything is small. It's amazing. We have a Costco here, which to my husband and I just brings America like front and center when we're here, right? It feels like home. But we have a Costco. But it's funny because you see the Japanese people go to Costco for a couple of things, right? They're going for fish and the rolls and the sauce that they need, right? And they go, and then here's the Americans with these like gigantic shopping carts heaped with things and things falling off. And it's just their intentional nature and their functional nature,
Mm.
and being purposeful of, I have this space, and so I can accommodate these things, and that's what I need today. And so, yeah, that piece to me is really interesting. There's some
I like
other,
it.
yeah, I like it, right?
Say hi,
And there's
Disco.
some other things in Japan, they have this, and I'm, of course, now that we're on the podcast, I'm going to lose the term for it. But I think, especially being a professional, excuse me, the Japanese have a word for this frame of mind that they encourage, which is never being perfect at anything, right? Never having
Mm.
succeeded, and always practicing at your trade or your craft, always getting better, constantly working at it and learning. And that fits me, because that's kind of how I've always been. I have this kind of unsatiable love for learning.
Mhm.
And so to hear the Japanese say back to me, like, that's good and that's okay. The more you learn, the less you know. Keep going, keep learning, right?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and that's true for so many things, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so to get that feedback in Japan, I think it was really important for me. And they, the Japanese see value in lots of things. They take broken dishes and they make them beautiful again and put them back together with gold,
So
and make
cool.
gorgeous pottery. Yeah. So those pieces of the culture, I think, and on top of just their undyingly considerate nature of other human beings, right?
Mm.
They look out for each other, and do things that are considerate to other people, and they act in that way. They all queue, they all stand in line, and ooh, you okay?
My cat's on my lap. My dog is like putting his head into me, and I'm knocking stuff over because of it. So that's where I am in life.
If it's not
Sorry.
the kids, it's the pets, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so those pieces, they don't try to cut in line, they don't try to take advantage. It's not me first. it's
Oh wow.
it's right, feels, wow, iconic. That piece, I think, has helped to slow me down and pay attention to people around me, and I think that's really awesome. um
Oh well, that is really awesome, and
yeah,
it's such a different, I mean, mindset. If
yeah,
not to
yeah,
play on the word, but like you know, I think sometimes, and because my ADD brain is like all the
yeah,
time, so finding stillness is really hard for
yeah,
me
yeah, yeah.
personally. Like, huh? What do you
Hmm.
mean? What do you
I
mean?
understand. Yeah, I
Stop.
understand completely. Yeah, and so many things contribute to that, right? We could have a totally separate podcast, probably 4 episodes, on all the different things that contribute to pulling you out of that intentional moment. Um, and those things exist here too, right? I mean, your entire daily world exists
Hmm.
on your phone. Your email is there, your electric bill is there, your
Hmm.
correspondence is there, your profession is there. Everything exists on your phone, and that's constantly accessing you, right? And that's true here too. But I don't see Japanese folks kind of constantly walking around attached to their phones. And again, there's lots of different reasons for that too. But it's just
Oh.
that different kind of more mindful or intentional nature. You know, there was a question, and I want to go back to Japanese geography in a minute, but there was a question that you sent me that I don't know if you're going to ask me later, but I'm going to jump to it for a minute, because
Okay.
it reminds me, when we're talking about Japanese culture, um, you kind of prefaced me with a question about Japanese parenting,
Yeah.
and if I see anything in Japanese parenting that kind of inspires me to be different or do differently, or take back to the States with me. Um, and, I think it's funny that of all the things that I've talked about with this beautiful culture here in Japan and all these wonderful, wonderful things that come along with it, when I see Japanese moms, one of the things that lands home for me is, a mom is a mom is a mom, is a kid is a kid is a kid, wherever you go. I think the first time I went out, and in public with my kids, to a big public space, I worried, right? Like, oh gosh, if one of the kids freaks out or has a meltdown or has a
Yeah.
tantrum, right? Am I going to be that cliche, like American mom with the kid who's freaking out and everyone's going to stare at me? And I went to a mall, and I'm in the mall and I'm walking through the mall. And the next thing I see is this Japanese toddler on his belly, full force tantrum, fists, feet, screaming, tears, crying, the whole thing, full force tantrum going on. And this
Wow.
mom just kind of standing there looking at him with the same thing that I would have been going through, like, oh my God, my kid's having this tantrum and everybody's staring at me. What am I going to do? Right. And just having that moment with her of like, we're in Japan and you're a Japanese mama and I'm an American mama, but I feel you, sister, right? Like we have the same experience. I have been there. We're just moms,
Yep.
and not, we don't always know what to do, right? And so I
Mhm.
think when I saw that, I was like, we're just humans, right? Um,
Yes.
so that landed home for me, and I think it actually gave me a little more confidence in my parenting, and a little more peace in those moments where we're not sure what to do with our kids.
Mhm.
Because I'm like, well, the Japanese who are awesome, they don't know what to do either, right? So, and I'm a child psychologist, and I don't know what to do in this moment. So it's okay. It's okay not to know what to do.
No, I had that exact experience. I think Declan was like 18 months and we were in New York, by like the UN of all places.
Right?
And he just decides to sit on the sidewalk and just melt down. And I'm just standing there. And
Yeah,
these people walk past me and they're walking past me. And I'm like, I'm just waiting it out because
yeah,
like I'm not gonna
yeah,
feed that energy. I'm not
yeah,
embarrassed.
yeah,
He's obviously not embarrassed. So I'm just gonna chill here. And then I
yeah,
remember looking at him and like, you done? And he
yeah.
kept going for like another minute. And then he was done. And I was like, okay,
That's
here we
excellent.
go.
Here we go. Yeah, and now we
Yeah.
move on. Yeah,
Now we move on. And
awesome.
now we
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
so what about like we've kind of touched a little bit about this, but how has your professional background helped you in this transition, support your
yeah,
loved ones and given you an outlet to
yeah,
be you?
yeah. Yeah, I think you hit both on the head, right? It has absolutely helped me, but also given me an outlet. And I think, I kind of laugh a little bit because people ask me this question. And I remember the first time it was posed to me, I was a young mom,
Mm,
with really young kids, in the mix of like infant, toddler, right? And it was a tough period of time, and I remember somebody I worked with turned to me and said, well, parenting must be so much easier for you because you're a child psychologist, right? So because of everything you know. And I remember just staring at them like deer in the headlights, like, yeah, yeah, right. And I think later I circled back to them and just said, I got to tell you, of all the things that I know, right, and all the strategies that I can do,
mhm.
being in that emotional space with your kids, it is hard for everybody, regardless
Yeah.
of your status, right? So whether it's a tantrum or whether it's an emotional space of transition of moving to another country or going to a new school, or my kids go to sports out in town. So they play sports on Japanese teams where they do not know the language, and coaches are yelling at them in Japanese, and they're like, I just don't, whatever, I don't know what you're saying to me, right? And being in those frustrating spaces, I think whatever that emotion is that you're in, being in that emotional space is hard. Um, I think my profession has helped me, in that, it's kind of normalized that for me a little bit.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think I think in my head, right, when I have those moments, I think my self-talk is actually what makes me the most resilient. So I can
Mm,
talk to myself in my head in the way that I know is healthy and helpful and pro-social and validating of somebody else's experience. And I think I learned all that in psychology school, right?
mhm.
And through practicing the trade. And I can hear kind of that old unhelpful inclination, that old unhelpful self-talk. And I can hear it and I can recognize it, like, yeah, okay, I know I really want to go to that place, right? It would be feel so much better to just go to that place and be really frustrated and right. But I this will be better for me in the long run.
Mm,
And so I think my profession has helped me in that way and be in that place with my kids. And I like to believe that that's helped my kids, right? Because if
mm,
I'm able to stay calm and regulate and choose a more healthy line of thinking, and I'm
mhm.
modeling that and sharing that out loud for my kids, I hope that that's transferring over to them, and making things easier for them, giving
Yeah.
them a space to be more comfortable, going through that transition. But I'm not perfect either, right? So it doesn't always go according to plan for me, all despite how I try. So um, I think it's been helpful, and I think some of the principles of just understanding sometimes kids when they are anxious, just like we were talking about
Mhm.
before, it comes out
Mhm.
in different ways. It comes out as what we see as misbehavior, right? Or emotionality. And for me, just being able to know that and to step back and go,
Hmm.
do you not want to do this thing right now because you're being defiant, right? Or do you not want to do this thing right now because you're super anxious about it and it feels
Yeah.
uncomfortable and you don't know what to do with that emotion? So long-winded answer. I think it's helped me help my small people in that way, and just recognizing when it maybe wasn't helpful and I need to go back and do a little bit of repair work, right, and help them out.
Yeah, but
Um,
it kinda also feels like it's helped you in a way because you have this specific skill set and these tools, and yeah, you're generally using them to help other people, but you kinda need those tools to help yourself right now.
oh, for sure. Oh,
And
for
I'm
sure.
only saying that because 'cause I'm in the same boat, and I'm like, "Okay, you have to be the big kid. You have to be the big kid." Like,
Yeah.
you are the adult. You are the
Yeah.
adult.
Who's
You.
making dinner tonight? Oh God, it's me. Right? Like I'm responsible for that. Yeah. Yeah. And that's totally true. But that old adage is true too, right? Like when we help ourselves, and even
Yeah.
if you put yourself first, and sometimes for moms, that feels really selfish, right? We
Yeah.
kind of get stuck in that space of like, I'm not supposed to do this thing to help myself because I'm supposed to prioritize other people. But when you help yourself first,
Mhm.
then you're in a healthier, more sound place to be able to help other people, or to recognize when you're not being helpful, right? And to do something different, go back,
Yeah, yeah.
because that
No,
happens
that's
too, no matter how we try, right?
absolute.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
imagining, like, my husband's a big we have football in our house, we don't have,
Oh,
soccer, so we have NFL and Premier League, and, there's this,
yeah.
Japanese player on his, team, he's, from Brighton, England, so I think his name is Matuma, and he's from Japan,
Yeah.
and I just think about the locker room sometimes because the manager is Italian, and you have, like, a handful who doesn't really speak English fluently at all,
Yeah.
and, his English is way better than my Italian, let's be clear here,
Uh-huh.
um, and you have, like, guys from, like, Brazil and, like, Ecuador and all
Mhm.
this stuff, and then you just
Mhm.
wonder, like, I mean, if he's yelling at him in Italian, like, how does anything get accomplished?
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's like and so that's what, like, we're asking of our kids, in these
Yeah.
situations,
Yeah.
but they're
Yeah.
gonna be fine,
Yeah.
and I think it just having that cultural,
Yeah.
you know, difference and a different way of seeing how things are approached in the way to life is very beneficial,
Yeah.
but in the moment when you're, like, on a football
Oh, yeah.
pitch, it's just like,
Oh, yeah.
"What the heck is
Yeah.
happening? What am I
Yeah.
doing here?"
Yeah. There's so much of that lost in translation piece, right? There's so much that is amazing because body language
Mm,
is universal, right? And so in a form, there's a lot of like this, like some like hand movements and some gestures, and that will get you very far. My husband and I always joke about the universal sign for the check, right?
yeah,
Like you just kind of catch the waiter's eye and like, I need the check, right?
yeah,
Universal. You can go to any country and do that. Maybe that's a broad sweeping generalization, but most countries, you can go and do that and they know what you're talking about, right? And so to some degree, here in Japan, that's very much the same. But yes, for kids, when that isn't as developed, right? They're, like you
yeah,
said, they're young, they haven't had 40 years of doing this and getting what they need, right? They don't know all that yet. So for kids, they don't even have those tools to lean into like we do as adults. So yeah, that's hard, but fascinating.
It is fascinating how some things are universal.
Yeah, yeah,
So what about like what have you been able to go and do that by living in Japan that,
yeah.
you wouldn't have done potentially otherwise?
Yeah, I'm glad you're kind of circling me back to this because I earlier when you asked me what are the things you've done in Japan that you love or that you'll take with you, right? I said that I wanted to circle back to the geography of Japan, because I just think it's so cool. Everyone in Japan talks about there's so much to do here, right? There's
Hmm.
so much to do in Japan, and I when people said that, I kind of sat back and thought about it, and I was like, really? There's so much to do in Japan. Like it's an island. Are you sure there's so much to do in Japan? But it is true. There is so much to go see and go do here. But I think one of the reasons that is because the geography is so
Mm,
compact, right? So where we live, I mean, we can see Mount Fuji out our window. So if you
wow.
drive 45 minutes, you're at the base of Mount Fuji and you can hike Mount Fuji, right?
Wow.
Yeah, you drive 3 hours south and you're at the beach and people are surfing and all the beach things and you can swim in the ocean and do the things. Or you drive 3 hours north and you're in the mountains, and it's beautiful winter wonderland snow. I mean, deep,
Wow.
gorgeous snow, and so you can ski. You're weeks away in the winter, all the way up through. People are skiing here in late spring,
Oh, wow.
because they get so high up in the mountains, especially up in Hokkaido. That I think when people say that there's so much to do in Japan, there is, but I think that compact nature makes everything so accessible, right? In the
Mm,
States, if you're like, I want to go ski in whatever, the big ski mountains out west. Of course, I
yeah.
can't think of it. Aspen or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't, it takes time, right? To
Hmm.
pack up and book flights and do this. It's not as accessible. Or you want to go to the beach in Florida, you got to take an airplane. And Japan is just so much more accessible. So we have done some really cool things like that. All those things I just mentioned. Although we haven't hiked Fuji yet, I think we're going to do that next summer. Um, but we've done the beaches and we've done a lot of the temples and we've done Tokyo. That's
Oh,
cool. Tokyo is
temples.
45 minutes from us. So we just go in and you can access Tokyo for a Friday night dinner. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Um, so we have done a lot of those things, but I think Japan has also given us access to another part of the world, right? So here, if you want to take a 4-day weekend, people visit Okinawa or people visit Guam or people visit
Mm,
Vietnam, right? Or Cambodia. Or
yeah.
you take a couple hour plane ride and you're in Singapore. um, I was joking with somebody because this summer, you ask the military kids here on base, oh, what'd you do this summer? Oh, I went to Bali. They're like,
Oh,
that was
bummer.
my summer vacation. Yeah, poor me. So it just, you have such access to a part of
Yeah.
the world that, um, my husband and I have said, I don't think we would have visited these places, if we had just lived and stayed in Jacksonville, Florida. Right.
It's
Um,
expensive to get there,
yeah.
especially as a family of five. Like, whew.
Isn't that it? Yeah. I mean, it's so expensive from the States and from here, honestly, not so expensive. And what you get for your dollar, is a lot, which is uncomfortable to say, right? Because that not everybody has what we have. I think I read a statistic once that talked about 90% of Americans are wealthier, than the poorest people in other parts of the world. And you're like, gosh, my goodness, that is just a terrible statistic.
Yeah.
Um, but bringing it back to the kids, having the ability with the kids to say, hey, it's Saturday. We're going to go make Henko stamps, or we're going to go catch cold noodles with chopsticks, at a place where this native Japanese is is perfecting her craft and making these delicious noodles and offering them, right?
Wow.
We're going to go see the snow monkeys. We're going to go, hike Mount Fuji. We're going to go to Bali for the week, right? So being able to show the kids these different parts of the world, different
Mm-hmm.
cultures, different ways of living, different languages, right? I think for us has made this experience just really one of the best, because I want my kids to grow up with that awareness of, hey, you live in Jacksonville, Florida, right? Or you live in
Mm-hmm.
Pax River, Maryland, or whatever it is, right? And you have Costco and Target and, soccer and all these first world Americanized things, but
Mm-hmm.
across the world, right, that this kid is riding his bike to school and is eating sushi during the day and going to school on Saturday because that's part of the Japanese culture, and that's good too, right? What you're doing isn't the only thing that's cool. What he's doing is cool too, and you know it because you lived it. Um, so I think that for us is really something that we'll take away from here, and the thing that we've done that's really cool.
No, I love that so much, and that's I feel like it's such a generational thing too. And I said this in a podcast earlier, but I feel like you see these gaps in society, and you see the way like your things are presented in the media, and the thing is, media is different in every country. So what
Yes,
we're
right.
getting told here is different than what I'll be getting in Spain, which is different on the TVs in Argentina when I was there, et cetera, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. Um, but at the end of the day, if you can have or gift your kids an awareness and an empathy, I feel like that is the greatest thing ever. And
Yeah.
you started the podcast off about talking about being uncomfortable, but like uncomfortable is just another word for growth. Like
Yeah, I
everything is a
agree.
growth opportunity if you choose to see it that way, or you
Yeah.
can see it as you're being a victim, or this is like
Yes.
so unfair, so unfortunate. But
Yeah,
and when it
I
rains,
agree.
it pours sometimes. Like that
Yeah.
was personally my day today. I was just like, can anything
Uh,
just go right? You know?
yeah. Yeah.
And it's so I do everybody has those moments of like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like I want to put my head through a window or something. That would
Yeah.
be painful. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's how I feel sometimes. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my god,
I understand.
through this brick wall, it'll be easier. Um,
Yeah.
but equally, if you take a step back and you look at it, it's like, okay, well, this is uncomfortable, and I'm gonna get through it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's just hard to see the other side sometimes. And
Yeah.
giving those uncomfortable situations to our children
Yeah.
is a way to flex muscles,
Yeah.
let them learn how to cope
Yeah.
with their emotions in a more productive manner, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was told to just sit down, shut up, or like be quiet,
Mhm.
don't cry, blah 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 blah. That's a
Yeah.
weakness. Like,
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
remember saying to my dad at one point in time, like, I just need to get it out.
Oh, yeah, you
I was like
do.
a
Yeah.
hormone or girl, I was like, this is
Yeah.
just who I am. I'm sensitive. I'm still sensitive.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I do cry sometimes. Um,
Absolutely. We
but
all do. Yeah.
right? But just like
Yeah.
giving that opportunity for to be uncomfortable, I
Yeah.
think is not just a gift for your own children, obviously,
Mhm.
but to the world for kids who might need an empathetic
Yeah.
ear at some point in time, who
Yeah.
you just never know who you're going to meet, and if you have a little bit of compassion and empathy, I think that
Yeah.
goes a long way
Yeah,
in the
you nailed
future.
it. You nailed it. And I love all the things that you just said. And I think I'm going to use that line that you just shared, right? Giving my kids the opportunity to be uncomfortable, because that's really, I told you I have the kids in sports out in Japan every Friday night. I drive my kids 30 minutes down the highway to take gymnastics at a Japanese gymnastics gym. And they all do it, all my kids. And then we drive probably 45 minutes back some days on traffic, right? And it takes up this huge chunk of our time on Friday nights. And I know, right, that people kind of look at me and they're like, why are you doing that? It's not because I think my kids are going to be Olympic gymnasts. That is not the goal here, right? The goal is to be uncomfortable. Just what you said. The goal is to learn a sport in
Yeah.
a country that you don't know the language, and all the kids are different from you, and to be the kid who's different, to be the kid
Mm,
who's uncomfortable. So just what you said, so you can learn and grow from that experience. You can build some stamina for being uncomfortable. You can also keep your body strong at the same time, right? But then maybe when we go back to the next season of our lives, when
mhm.
you see the other kid who's uncomfortable, you'll remember, I know how that felt, right?
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
when you see the foreigner traveling in our country, they won't seem like the weirdo, right? They'll feel like you when you were in Japan. It's just somebody from another country in your environment, right? That's normal. So
Perspective,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, giving them the opportunity to be uncomfortable. That was perfect. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I said
Yes,
something
ma'am.
right today. Well, and I love that like perspective too. It's like I am my chiropractor's from Puerto Rico, so like her I know it's like a US territory, all that stuff, but she comes over and her English, she has a beautiful accent. I think all accents
Mhm,
are beautiful
mhm.
personally. And she's had the people tell her like speak English and she's like, I do
Oh,
speak English, like that kind of
yeah.
stuff, and is having those experiences, and she's like,
Mm,
she's just as American as the next person, like if she
yeah.
wants to choose to identify that way. But
Yeah.
she's Puerto Rican, and she's
Yeah.
amazing. And
Mm,
she said something to me because I was like, oh, I'm struggling with Spanish, and like I know how to speak a little bit, blah blah blah. And she's like, well, she's like, as long as you're trying, she's like, you're gonna come across the people who are gonna be asinine, and she's like, and you're
mm,
gonna come across the people who are gonna be kind, and you just lean
yeah.
into kindness. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I need to do
Yeah. That's a
that.
wonderful piece of advice. Yeah. And that reaches all facets of our lives, right? No matter what you
Mhm,
do, you're going to meet people who give it back to you with kindness or with
mhm,
acceptance, and you're going to meet people who give it back to you with snark or negativity, right? And
mhm.
it's up to you to choose which lane you're gonna dive into, right? Which one you accept, which
Absolutely.
one you take. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, is there anything we haven't covered? Because I feel like this has been really great. I feel like there's a lot of different avenues we could go down,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
also know it's 6:15, almost 6:15 your time. You might have to
Yeah.
go
Oh,
do
wow.
mom stuff.
We're so good. It was so fun talking with you. Really, other things we haven't covered, I think, I think we covered so much of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. And I hope some of what we talked about, is applicable to your listeners, in lots of different ways, right? Maybe they
Mm,
can take some of the things that we've talked about and just apply it to different experiences in their own life, because not everybody, has the opportunity to move overseas, to travel overseas.
mm,
But I think a lot of the things that we talked about, are applicable right in your backyard, right?
absolutely.
Putting yourself in new and uncomfortable situations, and giving your kids that opportunity to be in new and uncomfortable situations, and normalizing that, and being
Mm,
uncomfortable with them in it, right? And modeling how to get through it, and also leaving space for their own experience, but not holding ourselves to a standard of perfection, just allowing us to be as human as they are, and lead, by some sort of example, and go back and make repair, when it doesn't go exactly as we want it to go. um, my dad, the way that you and I met, Brianna, was,
yeah.
one of the things that is hard about military life and living overseas, I guess, that we didn't
Hmm.
talk about. You are very far from family. And so Brianna and I actually met at a bar in Jacksonville, both waiting for an airplane for very different reasons, right? But we met there because my dad had died, and I traveled to Jacksonville to be there for my dad's services. Um,
Hmm.
that makes Oconus living and military living very difficult, being so far from our families. But I think, to pay him a little bit of homage, one of the things that's given me, the kind of courage to continue to enjoy this lifestyle, and want this lifestyle, and move forward with this lifestyle, is that every experience is worth living, right? The hard
Mm,
ones,
Yeah.
They give us something. The fun ones, the joyful ones, the easy ones, everything gives us something or builds something in us or teaches something in us. I learned that from my dad. And this life keeps reminding me of that. Every experience is worth living. And it's a beautiful life and a beautiful world. So just keep growing, just keep learning, right? Just keep loving people and try to do the best you can to give something back. Right?
Absolutely. Oh, I'm gonna leave it there.
Yes, ma'am.
I could go down rabbit holes, but let's maybe
Another
save that
another time.
another
Another
time.
time. We'll do this again.
Oh, well, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing some of your morning with us. I
Yes,
do
ma'am.
appreciate you checking in with us and telling us about your experience. It's 13 hours ahead. That's a lot of time zones.
Yes.
I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna. This has been Michelle McDonald, clinical psychologist, and I hope that you learned something you didn't know you needed to know.
Thanks, Brianna. Thanks for having me.